Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mom series, The Misunderstanding of Multiplicity, where today I'm not going to talk about multiplicity, but I am going to probably walk around the kitchen and talk about, waiting for my coffee over here. I am going to talk about mental health labels and why we should not use them frivolously. I'm going to say that word again. Frivolously. We shouldn't use mental health labels in a frivolous manner in everyday convo. Like, I just get a little bit manic. I'm just feeling a little ADD. Oh, that's just my ADD. I'm being kind of OCD. I want to talk about that in this video. How people kind of subscribe themselves to, I'm being a little schizo. I'm being a little, just applying labels. Anxious. I'm really anxious when you're not. Or because you have a place for everything and everything a place, you think you're OCD. Or because you want something done now, you think you're obsessing. Or because uh, you're moving very quick and you got to get things done fast, you're calling it manic. We do this. We self-subscribe to things. We hear medical lingo in the media all the time, and we normalize it. And there are definite situations where that can blow up against everyone. So today I'm going to talk about the case of Gabby, Petito, and Brian Laundrie. And then I also want to talk about why I believe this is not white missing woman syndrome that's going on in the media. Excuse my coffee while it's ending. There was this thing called white missing woman syndrome, where the media just latches on to either a child, a baby, a teenager, or a middle class to upper middle class white woman that is missing or has been murdered, and the details around it just make no sense. And somehow it captivates the attention of well, I'll tell you how somehow. The news keeps it going. They follow every little breadcrumb. They report every little thing. And a lot of our African American and Latino and uh, brown and red and yellow colored sisters and brothers, families are waiting for their missing loved ones and waiting for murders to be solved. And they want justice too. And they see stations like some of the stations that are being called out are CNN, although they're not the only one. CNN has not overreported on Gabby and Brian's case. Has it garnered a lot of world sensation? Yes, but not because Gabby is a white missing woman who's of a middle upper class. So there are times that the media does it, and then the public eats it up, and they're all over it. They're sleuthing, they're watching the court case, they're doing all of it. When court TV first came on, I think the first big thing that everybody got involved in with, well, was it Mr. Plum in the library? Was it Miss Scarlet with the candlestick? Or everyone in the world was looking, going, did O.J. Simpson do it? That was the first case, okay? He was a black man. He was a famous black man. Why do, why do I believe this is not a case of missing white woman syndrome, missing white woman syndrome? Because there's so much more to this case that doesn't make sense. There's so many questions to this case, and it was such a public case from the beginning. Granted, even though Gabby Petito, her dream was to build a website and to be a travel blogger and encourage other people to live their best life now, and to say no to all the hogwash. If you're in a life that's not making sense, if you're working the grind and punching a clock still, and especially after COVID, where you worked from remote or you worked from wherever you wanted to work from, and suddenly you realize, hey, we weren't supposed to be doing that, or I wasn't supposed to be doing that. I want to go travel. I want to see the world. I want to live this life. I want to be in this life now. That was Gabby's message. Get out there, do your living, now because life is too darn short to not. So, she was posting everything on Instagram. So there was quite a few people that were following her. And not as much as now. Everybody's on Instagram now. Everybody's on the website she was working on, Nomadic Static. Everybody was on YouTube. More people are now, of course. The world is watching. And they should be, because there's a lot of different elements to this case that don't line up and that were not handled right from the start. And it does go to the weight of white privilege. It does go to the weight of um, when you're traveling through God's country, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, when you're in God's country, there is still a good old boys system. And so I want to talk about the traffic stop in Moab, Utah. That is out there everywhere. There's footage everywhere. If you want to go look at it, there's an hour and a half long footage of the police stopping Brian and Gabby because a 911 call came in right outside of the Moonflower uh, Inn, which is a co-op, Wi-Fi, everything you need when you're traveling, little cafe. Gabby and Brian had been in the Moonflower, which is not that unusual because anyone that's traveling around Moab, Utah would eventually end up there for something, right? And in fact, I believe um, there was just, and I want to talk, and I want to link two cases together. So what we know is that Gabby went missing. Brian is still on the run. I don't believe that. I believe Brian has been dead for a while. I believe his parents wanted to get him on the run. Okay, that's number one. His parents wanted to get him out of Dodge. Here, go, go. We're gonna help you. No matter, just go. Okay. No matter what they say, they wanted to help him. Just go find peace. There were people camped. The media was camped outside of Brian Laundrie's house, his parents' house, screaming, "Where is Gabby?" I mean, the neighbors were screaming, "Our street is crazy," from all the media. Police were there. Everyone was there. FBI was there. And still Brian slipped away. And it wasn't until 4 days later, his parents actually had to call the police and say, "Brian's missing." He said he was going to go here, but Brian's missing. Now, I got to tell you, any car leaves that driveway if the entire media is camped out around that driveway, along with the police thinking he's a person of interest. He's not really a suspect yet. He was the boyfriend. He was the one that traveled with her for 4 months in that van. Why is that van? Okay, they went and got the van for evidence. They didn't do much more because Brian retained a lawyer immediately with his family that said, "Don't talk. If you don't talk, you can't be guilty. You didn't say anything wrong, so you're not going to talk." Until there's actual charges, which are going to come down, I hope, today, that his DNA and his genetics blueprint was all over around where Gabby was found dead. That would then leak him, of course, to her murder because the autopsy first findings was homicide. So you can rule out suicide, you can rule out drug overdose, you can rule out all that other stuff, you can rule out she tripped and fell. Whatever Brian is trying to say, it's a homicide. So Brian may say, "I left her," or "she left me," or "I came home," or whatever. There is still a dead woman found in Wyoming, which is where they were heading. Okay. Um, but in their travels, they were traveling the same route as Crystal um, Beck Turner and Kylen Schulte. Kylen is a 24-year-old woman, lesbian, who is married to her partner, Crystal, 38-year-old woman. This young couple, this young in love couple, because they had just gotten married a few months ahead of time, were very open about their um, sexuality. They had a lot of friends in Moab, Utah. They had a lot of friends in many campsites up from there to Wyoming. They were known locally as badasses. They were a very out and proud lesbian couple. When I say badasses, people have explained it like we don't mean they were bad. We mean these women. They just exuded sunshine, warmth, joy, and their souls were to help anyone on the road. They would have helped anyone, and if they saw somebody in trouble, they would have intervened. They would have spoke up. and nothing shook them. That's what they meant by badasses. So, um, Kylan's father has been doing all of this work himself, trying to figure out who killed his daughter and her husband, Crystal, his, that he considers his daughter too. They're family. They were married. They're a couple. Okay, they chose to be on the road. They chose to live the van life, and um, they both held jobs in Moab. One worked at McDonald's, another one worked at the Woody Tavern, and was hoping to get both of them working at the Woody Tavern. And Kylen worked part time once in a while at the Moonflower Inn, which was right across the street from where the domestic stop is. Um, Moonflower being as it is a co-op, people shared time there. So Gabby and Brian, it was over 100 degrees when the police stopped them. Gabby and Brian had been stopped on the very day before Crystal and Kylen went missing. Okay. Now, Crystal and Kylen had gone out of their way to let their friends and family know there was a creeper guy. There was a guy that was creeping them out. They had such a bad feeling that they were actually switching their campsites, which was unusual. They had several different places they parked, several different places they kept their stuff. They kept their campsite pretty secure, even while keeping on the road, because they worked there. So they were letting people know we're going to pick up and move campsites. This guy, we can't shake him. We can't shake him. He's everywhere and he's no good. That's all they were saying. But they let people know they worked with. If something happens to us, there's this creeper guy that we can't get rid of. They went so far as to write down, Kylen wrote down in her journal next to her Bible, if anything should happen to us, there's been this creepy dude hanging out, and we're trying to outrun him and get in a different place. Okay. For the 4 days leading up to um, the disappearance of Crystal and Kylen, um, those were the 4 days that Brian's behavior was excelling. That now we have people that were road tripping, that were van life people, that were just people that were in a restaurant. They all ran into Brian in the same places that Crystal and Kylen would be. One older gentleman said he just started picking a fight with him over politics. Like, he was definitely a conservative, right wing kind of guy. And Brian was kind of giving him whatnot over politics, and they were going back and forth. And he was like loud and calling him a well, like a Trumper and just all kinds of things. And saying, well, this is very close-minded of you. And the guy he was picking the fight with was saying, you need to go to your corner now, because what do you expect? You are in conservative God country. And so if you come into a tavern, that's what you're going to see. And so he seemed to be challenging that all along the route. He also was in several restaurants with Gabby, fighting with her, but not only fighting with her, she was crying. He was fighting. He was running in and out, but he was fighting with the hostess, the waitress, the the manager, the people outside, people that were just walking by. So Brian's behavior was purely escalating to what I would call a mania. He was getting combative, demonstrative, controlling, and kind of manic. Now, when I say kind of manic, I don't know that he's bipolar. I don't know that anybody knows they're bipolar until they do. That said, everyone that has ever known Brian in school has said he was always very level headed. Everyone that's ever known Gabby has said she was always very level headed too. What they've all said is Brian and Gabby went up and down all the time. They were on, they were off. They broke up. They had immature fights from high school. They had fights like a brother and sister would have, and that escalated. And then it was all off, and then it was all on. So they were fire and ice. Um, and Brian seemed to be even killed. Yet some of Gabby's friends have said he was very controlling, that he would do deliberate things like take her wallet, take her phone, grab her keys so that she couldn't go out with her friends. So he definitely had the profile of somebody that was trying to control her by um, uh, locking her out of a car, trying to get her out of her own van, um, fighting with her over her phone because he didn't have a phone. He was using those little burner phones that you buy a card for. So by the time the police were called to the stop right across from Kitty Corner to the Moonflower, um, and the actual memorial service for Kylen and um, Crystal, two women found shot to death by a creek, was at the Moonflower last night. So um, from day one, I have thought they're connected. I don't know why the police in Utah and the FBI are saying, no, there's no connection. How they could say that quick, other than Brian was not a a suspect for homicide. Um, all they had was a domestic call. That's all they had. Okay, so the police arrive, and Gabby is purely distraught and crying, and she looks battered. Anybody that has ever been in a domestic violence situation, a child of domestic violence, a partner of domestic violence, anyone that's worked or shown up knows Brian is all hands all over the place, shoulders up. It's not me, not me, her. Okay, and Gabby's just she's becoming diminutive. She's just kind of like, I think there's like a relief. Police are here. I'm going to be safe. And there's also a, uh-oh, I'm going to get hurt worse. Police are here. So they're not going to believe me, whatever I say. See, that's the thing with domestic violence. Whatever you say, it can go sideways and wrong, and you can get more hurt eventually. So she knew that. She knew that every person that has ever been battered knows that whether you step up and tell in front of your abuser, they may be able to separate you for a while, but eventually they're going to hold that shit against you, and it's going to come down on you in the most intimate, beautiful, wonderful moment when you think everything might be okay. It's going to turn. So, in the hour and a half of the domestic call, we see Brian really chatting up the police, trying to almost bring the police together. Like, he's constantly looking at one policeman, smiling, looking at another. His hands are all over the place. His shoulders are up here. He's trying to unite these policemen in his story. Gabby is being put in the van as the aggressor, as the one that made all these scratches on his hands, his face, his eye, his neck. Oh, look, let me see, you got one on your neck too. Oh, look, another scratch there. Okay, so the police know now that Gabby wasn't the aggressor. That maybe these two, maybe she was defending herself, right? Because I've seen people be like, well, she was touching him, he was touching. Well, you know what? When there's domestic violence, both are touching each other. Somebody's doing this. Somebody's scratching back. Somebody's trying to hit an arm to get it to stop. Okay. He was fighting over the phone all that week. Everyone that saw him said he was fighting with her and that she was crying. And he wasn't afraid to fight with everyone else. Now, when he gets with the police, he's smiling and he looks maniacal. He's all over the place. And Gabby actually does say, "Oh no, he wasn't slapping me. He was doing this. He was doing this. He was holding my face like this." They never mentioned that. They never mentioned that. She is seen over and over again showing a female officer who went to talk to her and another, the same officer that was kind of running things, um, that he kept doing this and that she was trying to get him to, that she was trying to get back in the van, that he locked her out, that she didn't shove him, that she grabbed his arm. She was kind of punching his arm to make him stop. And that he started to speed up. If you see the footage, he started to speed up as the police lights went on. He started to drive erratic. He's blaming her for the bump. Oh, I went over the bump. Oh, I'm sorry I went over the bump. I'm sorry I went over the bump. Oh, I didn't mean to go over the bump. Oh, I'm so sorry I went over the bump. The bump. Went over a curb. He went over a curb, which means he had to deviate over a line to go over the curb. But he called it a bump. I went over a bump of the road, bump of the road. She yanked my arm. She yanked the steering wheel. She yanked the steering wheel. She yanked my arm. He's all over the place. And the police automatically default to, because Gabby, I'm sorry, God rest her soul, is still crying in the car like this. She's hyperventilating. When she's not crying, she's hyperventilating. It's over 100 degrees. They go get her some water. She sips it. She's still concerned about Brian. When they finally decide they're going to separate them and they're going to make her the aggressor, but oh, this is your good day. We're not going to charge you. We can charge you, but that would just be so inconvenient for you, the van. Brian would have to go down to the courthouse, file a paper saying he didn't want it. Well, we're not going to charge you. All right, so we've all seen that go down. We know how terrible it is. Why is this not white missing woman syndrome? Because we have the footage of the police stop. We have the callers. We have people that were road tripping. We have an Instagram account, 2 of them. We have a website. We have a mission she was on. And we have a man returning home who is not being interrogated, who is not immediately brought in like everybody that's with a missing person is, like Scott Peterson, like Susan Smith with her children, Diane Downs when her children get anybody that, no matter how close you are the person of suspect first. The Ramseys, we don't see that. Okay? I do believe that if a Black child or a Latino child went missing, I believe if these circumstances, like a daughter or son, if these circumstances were surrounding it, all these circumstances, the parents are lawyered up behind a lawyer. They got nothing to hide. Why are they hiding it? The media is camped out in front of the house, but he disappears. Comes back with her van. So many people say, oh, he was really like bad. And 2 women show up dead within the same vicinity. And the language used to describe Brian by every single person that met him was, he gave me the creeps. He seemed creepy. He had a really dangerous energy. I was upset enough I told my husband, I'm gonna leave. This guy is coming undone. Ugh. Let's get out of here. So everybody wanted to get away from him. Everybody. Meanwhile, the police are chatting it up with him. He pulled them in is what he did. He did a total narcissistic, very manipulative, controlling move where he sucked the police right in to normalizing what just went on in the van, what's been going on, why that girl, why she's so upset. He normalized it. He normalized it. They got sucked in. They were pulled into his deception. And to the point where they're talking about their wives. Well, my wife, I know I tell her to go take a shower, cool off. You can go here to take a shower. Well, we just walk away from each other. These little things build up. I know my wife gets, and I'm wondering in that part that we can't hear, if they didn't go down the road of, well, that time of the month, women get a little, because I think this was a very old boy situation, even though there was a female there. Now, the female officer is saying, I can't hear it, but I actually, when I was alone by the van with Gabby, I told her, this, no matter what just happened here, what's been happening, this is your chance to get away from him. This is your chance to start. I don't need to have a big occurrence, something bad that he did to you on this stop. If you're feeling this upset and uncomfortable, it's time for you to depart and stay away from him. Never mind the van, never mind the block, never mind everything. this is your life. She was, and she was the one brought on the scene that the other policeman said, okay, I'm going to leave this to you and I'm going to do this. And I'm going to trust you with this. Like he was almost like he was training her. So again, you see one policeman kind of running the show, the other two standing around. And even when he drives off with Brian, Brian is still like, oh yeah, I'm from New York. Yeah, when they're talking about Florida, but I see New York. It's like, oh yeah, I've been to New York. Oh yeah, New York is so different than this. This is so great. They're still chatting like best buddies. Okay. I really believe that's why this stays in the news. The fact that they have been going to the laundry house and grabbing peace offerings. Like, okay, we've got the van. Okay, we're gonna go and search and get the computer devices, electrical device. Now we're gonna go get DNA evidence last night. Now we're gonna go look at the scene where Gabby was found, and we're gonna match his DNA to it because now he's gonna be a suspect. He's already dead. He's dead. He jumped a cliff somewhere, and I just really feel that he went right back to the area of where Gabby was found and jumped a cliff. So I believe they will have found him dead. Um, there'll be some kind of a note or something, but it might be totally ruined. I also think there have been people that have been saying that Brian is posting on his uh, Instagram, a lot of sleuthing going on. People are like, oh, well, I saw him on Spotify change his playlist. I saw him on Instagram. I saw him post to Gabby. I saw him post to his parents. I saw him post here and there. Um, he did have the ability to time a post so that he could have made a post when he first left and schedule it to come out later after he got out of Dodge, went to Mexico, went to Canada, wherever they think he's going. John Walsh keeps saying he's out of town. Parents are footing the money. The parents are whatever. I think he's dead. He's not the typical type that would kill himself. Usually, domestic violent males don't kill themselves. They usually kill the person they're controlling, and they're too. Um, they love themselves too much to kill themselves. But I think he had a couple things going on with Brian. I think that he was cycling up to a manic point, and when he realized the damage he did, I think he did. So I feel like he jumped. So that's what I've been going with, and then he will be the prime suspect, and they'll find his body, and they'll find evidence that he killed Gabby. In the meanwhile, I think they'll also find evidence that he may have been the killer. I think he was. I think they'll find that Crystal and Kylen were shot to death. I think Brian had a gun. I think they will find gun holes and wounds in the autopsy. I think she was choked and I think she was shot. And um and for all of these reasons, that is why it's not white missing woman syndrome, but we have to be so careful that we don't fall into that trap when we're watching the media, when we hear about missing persons, when there's Amber Alerts, when there's any kind of missing males. There's so many missing males that are still out there. I was reminded of this when I was watching the Monsters Inside 24 Faces Personalities of Billy Milligan. Um, in the latter years of Billy's life, when he was out of state forensics facilities, um, two young men went missing, and they're just cold cases. And and in Billy's death, he admitted that he killed him, and then he admitted to a girlfriend that he had the glasses that were found in Billy's possession that one of the young men was wearing with his bloodstains on it. But that's still a cold case. Mike Madden's case is still cold. So and he was a white man. The other man, Dwight, was a black man, and they never followed up on it. And Billy was the last one with him. So there is such a thing as white missing woman syndrome. Um, but for all the reasons that the whole world is watching Gabby and Brian right now and what's going on is because so many mistakes have been made along the way. When you return home and there's a missing person you've been traveling with for 4 months, you're usually hauled in and interrogated. You usually don't lawyer up. You definitely don't go away. Your parents don't go away on a little weekend trip either. There isn't all this back and forth. Usually people don't leave a cross country trip to come home and do some storage building with their dad. I think they're going to find something in the storage area that had to do with Kylen and Crystal stuff. So I really want to talk about that. And last but not least, why we shouldn't label ourselves. I believe the entire domestic call went sideways because Gabby made a fatal mistake of saying, I was getting anxious all day. My OCD. OCD. I have OCD. She says, I have OCD. And then she says, I was being OCD-ish. I was anxious. He was bringing sand in the van. It's very hot. There's a lot of flies around here. I was trying to work on my website and he kept tracking sand in and I was trying to clean and keep it clean. And she said, I was trying in my OCD. Now her father and her mother said she was never diagnosed with OCD. She also said, Brian actually said she was getting manic. She was being manic, anxious about me keeping everything clean. So what we got out of that report was there was a mental health problem, that Gabby was OCD and manic, and she was the aggressor. So let's not label ourselves with things we think we self-subscribe to. Not blaming the victim. I'm just saying be very careful before you call yourself, well, I'm being ADD, because you know what? People with labels are vulnerable. It goes both ways. We make ourselves vulnerable by right away saying, oh, I have this disorder, or oh, I have a panic disorder, or oh, I'm anxious, or oh, I'm having anxiety, or I was just being OCD, or I was just being a little manic. Keep that to yourself. Unless you have a diagnosis written on paper, unless you have a medication, which the police were asking, Gabby, do you take something for your anxiety or the OCD? Oh, no. Any drugs at all? No. I mean, I smoke a little weed once in a while, but no. Brian, do you take anything for your mania, your anxiety, because they asked him, are you always this hyper? Even when Brian was calming down, when Brian should have been calming down, when the police were like, okay, we've got her in the van. She said, yeah, she did hit your arm, and yeah, she's been a little OCD-ish and anxious, and we're going to list her as the aggressor. Even when they were there, Brian was still like, oh yeah, I'm so sorry I went over that, because he was escalating, and a lot of drivers do this. When you're in the car and a domestic violent person, a person who's been battering you, wants to intimidate you, they will start speeding up and driving erratically. Not to get away from police, but to show you, I can kill you if I want to. I can run this car off the road. Go ahead, make me. You know, they do that. And I believe he was starting to do that until he saw the flashing lights go on. So the minute he looks at the one police officer and drags the other one in and back and forth, like, he can't really read the guy on his right because he's got a mask over his heck, one of those gator masks. He can't really read. Is this guy getting my story? Because he's still standing here like this. The other guy, down and chit-chatting with his hands, he can't read the other guy. So he's trying to bring these two together. And it isn't until the one police officer says to the other guy, okay, we're going to do this, and to the female officer, we're going to do this, that his shoulders go down. And now he's just leaning against the van, waiting for his ride to the hotel. So, I do firmly believe the domestic stop could have gone so differently had they not deemed it, had they gotten the story right to begin with, that Gabby was being slapped. And that even if Brian was getting, hands were being put on, it was in self-defense. And I do believe that there's a long stretch of road with only a few stops, and they had to keep going back and forth. And both Crystal and Kylen and Gabby and Brian were in the same areas all through that stop, and they both went to the same destination. They were heading for Wyoming. Crystal and Kylen were heading for Wyoming, and Brian and Gabby were too. Okay, that's all. And Gabby's body was found there too. So, that's my video, and happy Monday of the last week of September. I hope everyone's having a great day. Thanks for hanging with me. Take care. Bye bye.